Welcome to Psych Sessions Late Career. I'm your host, Dave Kreiner. What does late career mean anyway? It can include people who are well into their careers, people who are thinking about retirement, people who are retired but still working, or maybe retired and doing other things. We have conversations with people in all these life situations. If you consider yourself late career, however you happen to define it, or you plan on being a late career person in the future, this podcast is for you. Welcome to Psych Sessions Late Career. I'm your host, Dave Kreiner, and I'm here today with Suzie Baker and Drew Christopher. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
Great.
Fantastic. Thanks for having us, Dave.
Yeah, thank you for agreeing to do this. So, as I've been recording the first few episodes of this special late career series, I've been kind of feeling out what are some good topics to talk about. And actually, I got some good suggestions from Stephen Chu, who will also appear in one of these episodes. So I have some ideas, like I told you, about types of things to ask about, but we'll just kind of see where the conversation goes. One thing I thought we might start with is all three of us have been at the type of work that we're doing in teaching psychology and higher education for a while. And I don't know if you apply the late career label to yourself or not. That's not required. But I'm just wondering, I have the feeling at this point in my career that I have more autonomy, that I have more choice over the types of things that I can decide to do or not to do. And I wonder if you feel that same way. And if so, how do you go about deciding what sorts of things you want to get involved in, what kinds of things you want to do, what types of things you want to stop doing at this point in your career?
You want to start, Suzie, or you want me to start?
You start. I'm thinking it over.
I think, I don't know where I classify myself in terms of the mid to late career spectrum. It's later than I think it is, that's for sure. And I think that's part of the thing I don't realize is that I still think of myself as being 35, and I'm not. I want to be careful that whatever I do with the next however many years of my career, 5, 10, or 15, somewhere in there, that I can finish it and it has value. I want to start things that I know I can see through. One of the things that we're actually doing on campus today, even though our classes don't start till Mondays, we're having a campus-wide for faculty 2-day forum on the general education reform that's going on, or not going on, that should be going on. That started at 9:00 our time. I got up and left to do this meeting because I can, because I think this podcast will have more value incrementally than what an older faculty member can contribute to a general education core that I'm going to be gone by the time it gets revised again. This needs to be the next generation of faculty that do this. So I think staggering out and figuring out what I can contribute at this stage is more of a process than definitive answers. But when I got up and left this morning, I'm looking around at all our good junior colleagues. I'm like, you have to live with this. I don't. So let me go do something else that'll be of more value. And that's what I'm fighting with, Suzie, is kind of figuring out where I best fit, realizing I'm not 35 anymore, even though I think I am.
Yeah, I would agree with pretty much everything you said. I guess I think of myself as late career. I, for some reason, hesitate to use that label, even though it's actually true. There's something in the back of my mind that says, oh, I start saying that, I start making myself irrelevant in some ways. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to kind of transition to a new way of thinking about that, if you will. But I agree with Drew in that one of the things I've started thinking about is, okay, what are those projects that I've always had in the back of my mind that I'm like, I really want to do that. Like, you know, this is the time that I want to try to finally do those things, or decide I'm not going to do them, but this is the time to do them. And I feels similarly to Drew about some of the issues. Like we're also looking at gen ed reform here, and we've been doing curriculum changes in the department as well. And I don't want to say that I'm not investor, that I don't care about those, because I do, and I feel like I have some experience and perspective to offer, but it is very similar where I feel like I'm able to sort of step back from being quite so emotionally invested in it as I would have been maybe 15 years ago. And I can say, okay, these are the pros and cons to these decisions that we're about to make. And like for, gen ed reform is a long-term process, and I most likely will be retired before this new gen ed program comes into play. So yeah, I think that's kind of a just different way of saying sort of the same thing that you were, in that some of this, I just have to step back and say, hey, you all are the ones who are going to be teaching this and living with this. And that does feel kind of freeing in a way, because I feel like, okay, that's not going to impact me for the next 20 years of my life, so I feel like I can focus more on some other things that I do feel like I have some things to contribute, and I can make something happen in the time that I have left.
Suzie, you mentioned, Dave, I don't know if I'm allowed to ask a question, but Suzie raised a point.
You are, go ahead.
Thinking about how do you step back emotionally? Because I see what you're saying. I want to be kind of a mentor, a guide, here are the pros and cons, go figure it out. I can live with whatever it is you all decide, speaking to the associate and assistants in my department. But how do you do that? Because I'm still emotionally there. Like, I still want this to work. I agree. I don't care what you decide, but I still feel invested in it, whatever they decide, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's been a process for me probably over the last 2 to 3 years. Of just kind of, my department's talking about something and I would be, like, oh, I don't like that. That's not the way we should do this. And I feel like, okay, make my point, explain, my point of view. But then I've been able to think it through, like, okay, well, does this really impact me? How much is this going to impact me? And, these people need to be the guardians of this going forward. I don't know how that happened, but at some point I was like, what am I getting? And maybe that's part of being older too, where I'm like, why am I getting so upset about this? At most I'm going to have to deal with this for the next, 3 to 5 years maximal. And we'll see how this goes. And I've been wrong about things like this before. So, we'll see how this goes. I think at some point, I guess I got, maybe I just got tired of being angry about things, tired of being frustrated by things. And I was like, well, okay, it'll be what it is. And also just realizing, okay, like you said, I have good colleagues and they'll figure this out.
Yeah.
And nothing that we're doing here is, like I'm fond of saying, like, we're not going to make a decision that's going to harm people. Nothing that we're doing. This isn't brain surgery, it's reversible if we say, oh, well, we're not going to require X course anymore. And then a few years later, it's like, ooh, that was bad. We'll fix it.
Yeah.
One
of the things I'm trying to do, and I heard this about 6 months ago from Stephanie Affel, was that there's no such thing as an academic emergency. And I'm starting to try to appreciate that. There is no brain surgery in our line of work.
Yeah.
There are things that seem like emergencies.
Correct.
But as Suzie describes, I think with some perspective, we realize it's not really an emergency on the level that real emergencies are.
Right. I think some of that came from, and you all have both been, I think anyway, been in kind of administrative type positions. And I think a lot of that for me came from, you know, being assistant department head and working in the main office. And, you know, students come in and for them, this is an emergency, you know, oh my gosh, you know, I couldn't get this class or this happened or whatever. And there's tears and there's, you know, a great deal of emotion, understandably on their side. And, you know, sometimes people in the office get upset with things. I'm like, hey, wait a minute, you know, this isn't a life or death situation. Yeah. Anything that's happened here can be fixed or can be, you know, maybe not fixed right now, but no one's gonna, you know, die from this. You know, it's registration. Yeah. It's not brain surgery.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Suzie, you had mentioned, Drew and I know we've both been department chairs. And Suzie, I know you've been associate chair. Is that your title?
Assistant department head. Yes.
Assistant department head for quite a while. And all three of us have been at our same institutions and departments for, I'll say, extended periods of time.
That's true.
How did the two of you go about making decisions about either staying in a role, changing a role, taking on a different responsibility, or deciding not to? And that could be within your institution or it could be professionally, because both of you, of course, have been and continue to be quite active with various professional organizations. So how do you make those decisions about, at this stage in your career, about what types of things to take on and what types of things to stop doing or to say no to?
Suzie, you start or me start? I'll be happy to start if you want.
Go ahead, Drew, you start.
I think, Dave, you just hit on a paper the three of us could write together, because I don't know, I have not stepped back to think about what the criteria are that I use to do X, Y, or Z. Basically, and maybe this is just an ego thing on my part, I want someone to ask me to do something. And if someone asks me to do something, it must be important. I know it sounds weird, but that's how a lot of things have happened. To this day, I still don't know who nominated me to be teaching of psychology editor. I still have no clue who that was. But it was such an honor. I'm like, sure, I'll pursue it, thinking, hell, they're never going to select me. Why would they select me? Oh, you're going to interview me. Isn't that cute? And then Steve Davis calls me to tell me I've got the job. And I'm like, ha, ha, ha. Oh, you're being serious. So, no, that was really, I remember that night, 2 nights after coming home from New Orleans in 2006, that phone call from Steve. And I think that's part of it. But I think some of it is, what is the value? How can I still learn something and contribute something of value? Because I don't think I'm at the point yet. I just want to go through the routine. I still want to learn. I still want to grow. I still want to try new things, which is a very good sign. Because I think there are people in our position that don't want to learn new things. So that's part of it. But part of it also is, okay, what are those things in my career I've never done, I don't want to miss out on? And I don't know what those are. I want to make sure I experience a lot of different things. Like I've been at a small liberal arts college now. I teach my intro psych class of, Suzie, hold on to your hat here, 35 students, and God forbid we have to over-enroll it to 38. Exactly. But you know what I would love to do is go back to the University of Florida or James Madison. Let me teach a 400-person intro psych class. I mean, I did it way back in the day. That would be fun again. It would be traumatic in some ways, but I think it would be a growth experience. So
it could be fun trauma.
What's that?
Fun trauma.
Exactly. The kind of growth I want. Do I want to join another one of my campus's major standing committees? I think after I finish the tenure and promotion committee this semester, sayonara, I'm done with that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think part of it is just, I want to grow. I definitely want to see, I think I'm more motivated by seeing the effect on students than I am my colleagues at this point, even though I know I need to do more to mentor my colleagues. Yeah. That's just where I am yet.
Yeah, I appreciate what you said about, people asking you to do something and you just saying, oh, yeah, sure. Because I've been in that same situation for a lot of good things that have happened to me. I mean, things that I was like, wow, really? Like, sure, not to say I don't, and I think that's when I'm talking to newer faculty, that is one piece of advice that I do give them is like, seek out opportunities. And if someone offers you an opportunity, if it's something that you're like, no, I don't want to do that, then of course say no. But if it's something that you feel like you might want to do, then say yes. I mean, the number of good things that have happened to me, experiences that I've had, projects I've been involved in, people that I've met, just because someone asked me and I said yes. I mean, it's really, I'm very, very, I feel lucky and I feel grateful. And, I always encourage faculty to seek things out and to say yes if someone asks them, do they want to do something? But I think for me, I'm at the same point that you are, Drew, like in terms of if it's a new thing at this point, then I'm open to doing things I've never done before, or things where I feel like, yes, there's something that I've always wanted to do in this zone that I've never done before. The things that I feel like I am wanting to step back from, or in the process from stepping back from, are things that I've been doing for a while. Some of the administrative tasks, for example, where I feel like I like doing these things, but I've been doing them for a long time now, and I get, sometimes my thought process is someone else should be doing this. Someone else should be making these decisions at this point, because, this is the way that I've been doing it for a while, but it's not necessarily the only way these decisions could be made, or the best way that these decisions could be made. And it's just really time for somebody else to deal with some of these kinds of decisions and some of this, minutia that does impact people. And so those are some of the things where I feel like, I would like to step back from some of those things, and probably will do more stepping back from some of those things in the future. Some of the things that I would like to get back to are things that I used to have time to do that I haven't had time to do in a while. Like one of the ways that I first got involved in STP was being like a reviewer for project syllabus. And I'm a reviewer for project syllabus now, but they rarely send me things. So I'm like, oh, I would really like to do more of that kind of thing, Anyway, I feel like we have a lot of similarities there, which is interesting. I admire you for saying that you might want to go to a completely different institution and do a completely different thing. Because at this point for me, that's like, oh my gosh, no, I can't see myself making that big of a leap.
No, not moving, but I'm thinking, sabbatical, something, go residency at James Madison or something where I could teach a class. That would be a different experience here, because I'm not sick of classroom teaching. That's still there for me. Like I'm still, classes don't start till Monday. My syllabi are done. I'm ready to get stuff rolling. I want to get going. So that part's still there for me, but maybe experiencing something new in that realm. Do I want to teach 3 or 4 new preps? No, not right now. I can revamp my first year seminar, keep my intro psych class up to date, doing a lot of changes, especially with the revamp of the AP test. I'm revamping a lot of my own intro psych stuff based on that. The personality class that I just started teaching for the first time in 26 years, 2 years ago, I'd love to teach that some more. So, I'm not ready to, I'm definitely not thinking about changing institutions. Who's going to hire me at this stage of my career? Let's be honest here. It would have to be a totally different role for me to move, I think. I could not go to another school and do what I'm doing here. It wouldn't make sense. There's no point.
So, Drew, don't be surprised if James Madison reaches out to you.
I was going to say, I know an people, offer. So,
Well, that's another thing, too. Thinking about this long term, where do I want to go when I retire? Because one of the things I have thought about is, okay, here's a 3-year visiting position in a spot I want to retire in. Let's go test this out for 3 years. Where, okay, it's not going to be the same atmosphere as here, but if UNLV has a visiting position for 3 years, and I'm thinking about retiring out there, which I am, oh, really? All of a sudden, we might have some company out there, So those sorts of things, like that's a thing. And I don't know how to make that happen as I think about my responsibilities here, which can still consume 40 to 80 hours a week, depending on the week. And I enjoy most of that time. Then I've got to think about this other life that's ahead of me, and I'm just not there yet. So
Yeah.
So Wayne, if you're listening,
I'm on my way, buddy.
make that happen for Drew.
Well, at least during
So
the
he can
school
check
year,
out.
during the summer, I'm going to come back to Michigan. I'm not spending the summers out there.
That sounds like a good plan.
Oh, it's actually, here's the thing. It's a great plan I just don't like the hot weather. But in addition, from a climate change perspective, Las Vegas is not that bad of a place to be because there's nothing to burn.
But
Great place
are they going to have enough water? That's concerning.
Yeah, I think it's Las Vegas. I think it will never run out of water. Let's just put it that way. There are no, it's Las Vegas. Las Vegas comes first out there. Trust me, they'll have water.
Well, I appreciate how thoughtful both of you are about responding to that type of question. I mean, for me, I don't think I've been maybe quite so intentional, although I do feel like I exercise more choice now when I decide what to do and what not to do. And for me, a lot of it is just this increasing recognition that time is limited.
Yeah.
So early in my career, I think consistent with what you were saying, Suzie, and also what you were saying, Drew, if there was an opportunity, I would say yes. And I think it was partly because I felt the pressure that I don't want to miss an opportunity that might be beneficial. And I don't say yes to everything anymore because I realize, if I say yes to everything, I am not able to do a good job at everything and I'm not going to enjoy it. But there's this increasing recognition on my part that there's only so much time in a day. There's only so much time, over the course of a year or a semester. And at some point, my career will come to an end. I don't know when. So I have to kind of think about, in whatever remains of my career, what's going to be the most valuable that I can contribute. What's something that's actually going to make a difference. And I think that's kind of what you started with, Drew.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of it too, Dave, and I don't know if this is just me, but it used to be, and I think COVID really made this worse for me. But all of a sudden, I used to come to the office at 7:30 in the morning, still do. Leave anytime between 5 and 8 at night, still do. Then I could go home and work more. Now, I'm noticing, like last night, and classes haven't started yet, mind you. I was up here from, 8:15 or so to about 5:30. Went home, walked the dog, and that was it. Like I could not refocus the rest of the night. Not that I needed to. Nothing was pressing for today. But that's just not, that's not what I used to be like. Now, all of a sudden, I'm like, the dog wants to stay on the couch the whole night? That sounds good. I'll do that. No, that was never. The dog would have to be next to the computer. That was the way it used to be. So I don't know if that's another thing, too. I just don't have the energy to do as much as I used to. And I don't know if that's a physical thing, a mental thing, or just a Drew thing.
Well, Drew, you're not 35 anymore.
Oh, that's right.
You look like you could be 35, but you're not.
There you go. There we go. There we go. That's what I want to hear.
That's true.
I act like I'm 16. That's another story.
Maybe that's what keeps you young, Drew.
I think it is. That's why. I was actually told by my provost, we really like you teaching first-year classes in the fall. I think that's a compliment. But then I realized, no, it's because you're as emotionally mature as the freshman coming in. That's what she meant, but
I think it's a compliment.
It's one of those things, maybe nobody else wants to do it. And I'm like, hey, sure, kids, come on in.
I strongly suspect that it's because there's a recognition that you have a beneficial effect, that they want these incoming students to come in and have a good experience and feel welcome. And
they get a very structured experience with me. Hopefully it's good.
Nice.
I don't let them out of my sight. That's for sure.
I'm sure that prepares them well. So let me ask about teaching. Could you each reflect a little bit about how your teaching has changed over the course of your careers, just in terms of the way that you teach your classes, maybe methods that you used to use, no longer use, or different things that you're doing now that you didn't do earlier in your career, just in terms of your teaching?
I can start.
Go aheed, Drew.
Because he's very deep in thought over there back in the ocean. I miss the overhead projector. Like, I mean, that's the technology changes that are out there, and I'm nowhere near.
No, I'm laughing because I was just thinking about the overhead projector because Deb Brill posted on Facebook about how they had internet issues at their institution and they can't do anything connecting with Wi-Fi.
Yep.
And she's writing on the board and the students seem like, what do we do with this? And I was like, hey, I'm happy to tell somebody how to use an overhead projector if they need a refresher.
We still have them on campus. They're still out there in storage closets.
I was wondering if we still
I saw
have
one
any.
at top this past weekend. I almost fainted. I'm like, that's fantastic. But here's the thing, and I don't know where I am in technology because I really enjoy learning about it, but then I get afraid to use it in front of students because I'm afraid I'm going to mess it up and then mess them up even more than I would ordinarily. But what's really interesting, our IT folks, our information technology folks, or instructional technology, really love when something new hits the street to have me test it out because, and I don't know if this is a compliment or not, again, I always find that minuscule problem no one else can. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen to me, like signing on to a Zoom meeting. That's things like that. That shouldn't be hard in this day and age. I'll find a way to mess it up. So I think that's been one of is just keeping up with technological, and I'm sure that was the case 60 years ago. People back then would have said the same thing, but for some reason, it feels like that's becoming more and more intense. Just using AI. I thought I was a stud. Look at me. I got the paid version of ChatGPT. Then I go to NITOP and I see this list of hundreds and hundreds of AI programs out there. And I'm like, am I supposed to actually understand more than 2 or 3 of these? And does it matter? I don't know. So there's a lot of that I kind of feel like, and it's to Susie's point, do I care? Like, do I need to get emotionally involved in using Claude versus ChatGPT 4.5 or 5 or whatever it is these days? So yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I think another part of it is I've given up control in the classroom. I've got to in some respects, do less so the students can do more or steer the class the way they want to go. When I look back at my IO class, the first time I taught it as a graduate student back in the fall of '98, I look at it today, it's not even the same course. It has changed completely, not just in terms of the readings, but in terms of the student projects they do, which are much more them than they are me. I give them a general, here's what we're going to do. And then they go into the organizational unit on campus or the business downtown and really do the work independent of me. And that's been hard to give up control, but it's also been great because I've learned a lot in the process. Like I know more about my first year seminar now after students in my IO class last fall did onboarding procedures the way they think they should have been done for freshmen, not the way faculty and staff think they should be done. That's been very enlightening. My first year seminar will be very different this coming fall because of that IO class.
What about you, Suzie?
I don't have a ready answer to this question. I was just kind of thinking many thoughts. Some along the lines of Drew with, in terms of technology and, now AI coming on board, those are really some areas where I do find I'm starting to get kind of overwhelmed because there's so much. And, it's kind of like I have colleagues who are using this thing and I'm like, I don't even know what that thing is, like I've never heard of that thing. Yeah. Like, should I know about that thing? Should I use that thing? I think that's becoming, for me anyway, a little bit more difficult to keep up with all of that. And that's on top of course, just keeping up with, the content of the class, how is that changing? Another thing that's different for me is that, I did go back to the classroom after COVID, but for the last 2 or 3 years, I've been teaching exclusively like online asynchronous. It's not typical in my department, but that's how I've been teaching. And so that has changed some of the things that I'm able to do because it's all asynchronous. And so that gives me freedom to do certain kinds of things, but also means that it's more difficult to do lots of other kinds of things that I would normally have done. It's kind of frustrating because I feel like I'm always behind with figuring out how I should be doing it. But it's also kind of fun because I'm like, okay, I want to try to figure out a way to do this. And luckily on my campus, we have a lot of good support where I can contact someone and I can say, hey, is this possible? How can I do this? And they're often very good at, helping me figure out ways to do it. So, for example, one of the classes I teach is senior seminar, history of psychology. And the content of that class, you would think it's history. How much does it change? Some of it obviously doesn't. But the content for me of that class has changed radically since I first started teaching it, 20 years ago. Just the whole focus of it, what we're spending more time on in that class has changed a lot. It's also a senior seminar, which is really interesting to try to do in an online asynchronous environment because, I always relied very heavily on, student in-class presentations and what we're doing in the class as a group. So moving that to an asynchronous format and having asynchronous discussions and having students, do their discussions in that way has been really interesting to try to translate the class into that kind of format. And I think it works really well. I think that many undergraduates struggle. I mean, the in-person version of this class and our senior seminars meet for like 2 hours and 15 minutes once a week. And I think many undergraduates struggle with keeping the focus for that long on a topic they may not be super interested to begin with. Let's face it, history of psychology. And not only that, but the time of day that you have to meet. My classes always used to meet like in the morning, like 9 or 10 a.m. And I would have students who frankly would tell me, this is not my good time. I'm not on at this time of day, which we know about circadian rhythms in young adults, and that's true. So doing this in an online asynchronous format has been a big switch, but I think it's been, I think there's advantages to doing it that way. That's a long kind of detailed way of talking about how have things changed and how have they stayed the same.
Yeah, I find that really interesting, though. And I have, I think, a somewhat parallel example because I also teach history of psychology, and it's our capstone course here. And so as a result of going through the pandemic where we shifted everything online and all of us became at least somewhat familiar with tools like Zoom, when we came back, I decided for that class, the way that I structure my capstone history of psych class is that it's pretty much entirely discussion based. It's not a lecture class. It is synchronous, but I decided what we're going to do is take advantage of a new format that our university calls flex format, which basically just means that the course meets sometimes in person, face to face, and sometimes not. And I took advantage of that. So we meet one day of the week in person and do small group discussions. And then we meet the other day, usually a Thursday, on Zoom. And we do the same thing, but we do it on Zoom. And what I found helpful about that, which is what I thought would happen, is that different students participate differently online in a Zoom breakout versus in the classroom. And being one of those people who is introverted, and as an undergraduate, I was the type of student who would never, ever say anything in class unless I absolutely had to.
Yeah.
But I would feel more comfortable if I'm in a small meeting room on Zoom, with 2 or 3 other people. So that's definitely something that has changed for me as a result of both the technology and of being forced to use the technology during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think, and I know it's easy to slam, online discussion boards and so on, but I've found that I feel like they work really well for this class. The students, post their little, like, it's all discussion based. The students post a little, video about their topic, and then they're the ones who pose the discussion questions, and they moderate the discussion online. And one of the things that I like about it being asynchronous is that it gives the students time to watch the video, to read what other people have said, and to kind of take it in and think about, what do they want to add to this discussion. Instead of, I was always the kind of student, like you're saying, Dave, where it was like, I can't be on like that and feel like I'm going to say something brilliant that's going to add to the discussion. I might have a thought about it later, but now it's too late. So I think that
the discussion boards allow that opportunity because, like you both said, I had a couple of students last spring in my personality class who never said a damn word in class. Looked like they were about to die in class. It looked like they were in absolute pain. Then we get to the discussion board and it's this most brilliant insight. I'm like, I never thought of that. That's really wow. So I think part of it is just like, it's a personality thing because they don't want to talk in class, but it's also a speed of processing. Like I would rather think before I speak.
Right.
Sometimes I think the in-person format allows for the speakers to dominate. Sometimes I wish they wouldn't. For a couple of people, especially like methods and stats, I'm like, I really need to shut this kid up because it's distracting to the rest of the class because they keep dominating the conversation and they're not very good at what they're saying. So,
oh yeah, my in-person senior seminar, I used to have to do the little, M&M technique. Everybody gets a cup with 3 M&Ms in it, and when you speak, you have to eat one of your M&Ms. And once your M&Ms are gone, you can't talk for the rest of the class because otherwise,
I would have
a discussion with 5 people.
I would have loved that M&M technique as an undergrad, Susie, because I would have simply eaten the M&Ms and not spoken up at all, and I would have been totally happy. Oh, you're watching. Okay.
There's only 12 in the class. I know who's talking. But the other nice thing about the asynchronous discussion is that it's all there in print, what everyone has contributed. So when I'm going back as the instructor and I'm trying to evaluate like a student's contribution, I have it right there. It's not like I have to try to remember what they said in class.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
get practice actually writing, which I think is not an insignificant.
I like that. Related to this topic that we've been chatting about, one of the questions that Stephen Chu had suggested that we could talk about in some of these episodes is I like this idea that he suggested. What's a technology that you once used that maybe people no longer remember? And I mean a technology in terms of teaching. And I'll give you an example. So last month I was in our department office chatting with our office professional and a couple of people about how, again, as a result of the pandemic, I decided I don't want to go back to using Scantrons for exams. It just seems so old-fashioned. And I switched over to, in some of my classes, administering exams through the LMS with proctoring. And, there's pros and cons of that. But when I started teaching, we had a pre-Scantron technology, which was that we would use a hole punch and create an overlay. Susie remembers that.
Yep.
So I was describing that. Yeah. So that was the technology. Is there? Can either of you think of another example of a technology like that you used early in your career that people would not be aware of anymore?
Yeah. When I first started teaching, I had to learn how to thread a film into a projector. I mean, I taught, things like animal behavior. There was no World Wide Web, so I couldn't click on a YouTube video to show them a behavior. So it was like, well, how are they going to see this? Well, we're going to watch a movie. We're going to watch a film in class. So I distinctly remember wrestling with the actual movie projector and threading the film in. Couple of times I used film strips. I don't know if anyone remembers those.
I remember.
Yeah. One of my first places I worked, they still had a mimeograph machine. Yep, with the Ditto Master and the whole 9 yards and the purple ink and the interesting chemicals. Yeah.
I definitely remember making copies with the Mimeo and the smell of that room and of the copies and the purple ink that I would get on my fingers.
And the rotating thing that would spit the copies out. Yep.
What about you, Drew?
The overhead projector, I mean, that might be something people can still recognize. That's definitely, for me, what comes to mind. I'm trying to think. I taught my first class in the summer of 95, and I wish I'd gone back, and I don't know if I've got anything from that class still available. I remembered VHS and DVDs. I don't remember putting the film in like Suzie did, but that could have been I just wasn't using films that much. DVDs, VHS, I definitely was using those. And I burned most of my DVDs to my Google Drive, so I'm still kind of doing that. I just like one step ahead, so I still got the DVDs on my Google Drive, so to speak. The mimeograph machine. I think writing on, like, for lack of a better term, writing on the overhead slides.
Oh yeah, I did that.
Yeah, do that on
the transparencies. That was my main way of lecturing, because I'm short. I couldn't reach the board. I couldn't reach the whiteboard.
That was great technology.
Yeah, I mean, most of the board is not accessible to me because they hang them so high, which no one ever thinks about. Like, how tall are people actually? Well,
Suzie, I'm 6'2", and their boards I can barely get to the top of on my tiptoes. So
I could use maybe the bottom half of the board. So I was always using the overhead projector. I remember, like, if the bulb burned out, I was always like, oh my gosh, I hope the spare bulb works.
Well, that's actually something that, I mean, this is talking about old technology, but I still make sure I've got the chalk ready to go or the pens ready to go in case that does happen.
Just in case.
So I think part of my angst, so to speak, is like, okay, there's more preparation you have to do now in case something goes wrong. With the overhead projector, if it went out, that was a problem.
Yeah.
But now there's so many other things that can go wrong besides a bulb burning out with the technology. It's so in depth. We had a IT person up here. People's webcams were out. The sound was out. I mean, every problem you could have was in this building this week. That just didn't seem to be a thing back in the day. Now, I'm sure I'm misremembering, but it just feels like there's so much more that can go wrong when you walk into the classroom than there was 25 years ago.
Yeah, that reminds me. I'll share a quick little story that reminded me of, Drew. This was, I don't know, maybe 15 years or so ago, approximately, when we were well into the PowerPoint era. And one day my research class said, Dr. Kreiner, it's a nice day outside. Can we just go outside and do our class outside? And I said, well, sure, let's do that. So we went outside and I went through whatever the material was that I had planned for that day. I think it was different types of quasi experiments. Obviously without the PowerPoint, without the slides, just sitting outside, and it was really nice. And then after class, one of my students came up to me and said, Dr. Kreiner, I had no idea that you actually knew that stuff.
Yeah.
Because everything was on a slide. Yep. Everything was on a slide.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Now I'm going to go to class on Monday and wonder that's a good point. I assume whatever. I try very hard. I don't think this is really the question we're answering, but I mean, especially in research methods and statistics, I try not to be completely bulb dependent with overheads or technology of any sort, to try to use both the technology and the blackboard or whiteboard, depending on what classroom I'm in, just so they get that variety and break things up, because that, for a lot of my students, is the most monotonous class ever. No matter how we know it's very different. There's a lot going on, but to them, it's just like being beat over the head. And so just changing it up, I think, makes a big difference. So, and maybe I didn't think about this, Dave. Maybe it demonstrates to them I actually know this stuff. So I'll take that as an added benefit.
Yeah. I love those examples. Let me just ask you one more question as we kind of get toward winding up the episode. So the idea for this podcast series on late career issues, the genesis of this was with the late career affinity group meeting that we had at ACT last fall. And there was a clear indication with the people who showed up for that meeting that there was interest in talking about late career issues. So my question to each of you is, what kinds of things do you think would be helpful for later career people like us or other people that you know? What kind of resources or communications or support would be helpful for late career teachers? Do you have any thoughts about that?
We have got at STP, and I think a lot of other professional organizations, a lot of resources out there for early career folks. And Stephanie Affel and I Stephanie was invited, and then she invited me on to the Oxford Handbook that Dana and Aaron are redoing to write a chapter on work-life balance. And we're focusing it on mid to late career folks because there's so much out there for early career folks. So, like, what are those resources that are out there for us in terms of, and I'm thinking maybe an ebook on late career issues, because we've got them for the early career folks, which we should. Well, what's out there? And maybe there's stuff out there and I just haven't found it. Can we have more of that and make it more of a talking point? I don't think it should be something we should be ashamed of, but is that something that we could pull together? Could the affinity group pull together? Not to dump this on you, Dave, because anybody could take charge of it, but I would be willing to bet we could put together a really good ebook through STP for late career folks.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. I would, sometimes I find myself like, I don't know where to go from here, if you know what I'm saying. Like, I don't really, because my life has been so tied up in my work, which I love. I love the fact that it is. I love the fact that it's engaging, that it's always new. That's been terrific thing. But because of that, I haven't really thought about what comes after. And so I keep wishing there was something like, okay, here's top 10 things to consider, or here's ways to start thinking about what comes next. Planning for the last 5 years and then planning for your first 5 years.
Yes.
Once you've retired, are there ways, that you can think about staying involved? And I know people who have done that, individuals who've stayed involved in things after they've retired, but something along those lines, like, because I feel like I'm not even sure how to start thinking about it. I was looking at something, I can't even remember what the source was, but maybe it was AARP or something, but it was something about retiring and preparing yourself mentally for retiring. And one of the things here's some questions to ask yourself. And one of the questions they said you need to think about is, for people who are very involved in their work, or even just people who aren't, people who work, you spend more time with your coworkers often than you spend waking hours with your family.
Correct.
And so they were like, okay, imagine that you're retiring. And their question was, who are you going to have lunch with on Monday? Like, you need to start thinking about, what's going to involve you socially and intellectually once you retire.
And having the time to do that, Suzie. I mean, because when I go home tonight, okay, I could think about that. I've actually got a couple of books on Amazon that I can share with the group on, like, non-financial considerations for retirement. I'll forward those on to you later tonight. That I started reading and I'm actually engaged with. But it's like, okay, how am I going to fill this time? Like, okay, I might go out to Las Vegas and retire. I don't like to gamble. Oh, that's why you want to go. No, I like the good food out there because you can swing a cat and hit a good place to eat, even way off the strip or downtown. You don't have to spend a lot of money to do that. I love being outside, that's for sure. But I don't know how this is all coming about. Climate change is part of it. I don't want to be in Florida. People figure I'm going to go back to Florida because I lived there for so long. No, I just don't think from a climate change perspective and a financial perspective, it makes sense to do that. But if we could get groups together like that, you sort of mentioned the retirement red zone, 5 years before and 5 years after, that critical period, both financially but also emotionally. What could we do to help people there? Because there are resources out there, maybe outside of STP, that we could reel in and say, okay, what can we do here to help our membership? Because we got a lot of people. That room was pretty full back in October.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Where are all these people coming from?
And I feel like I feel like the financial guidance is out there. Like, I feel like I know where to find that kind of information. I've got the retirement account, I've got the person, and, I've been working on that for years. But the other part to me is the big kind of the void.
I would eat lunch at my desk on Monday. That's who I eat with most days during the week.
Right.
So, okay, I can still do that at home, but I'm not working on my 1:00 class or my 2:15 meeting or whatever it may be. Right. So I love my working lunches. Those don't drain me. Those energize me because I can actually eat to feel good and get some work done. Then what?
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're right. How would I do that?
I mean, I think about the fact that, when I'm at the office, and I'm not there every day, but I am, 3 to 5 days a week. And when I'm at the office, I'm mostly in my office and I'm working, but there's people right outside my door, like I'm calling out a question to our administrative assistant, or when I realize I can't stare at the computer anymore, I leave the office and I just walk around the hallways and I find people and they're in their office and I knock on their door and I talk with them, but so how's that, what's going to happen there?
I think that's a great idea, Suzie. And I could see that maybe that could be a chapter in this hypothetical ebook. But
someone else will have to write it because I don't know the answer.
Right. We got to find the right people to write it. But I wonder also if it would be possible and worthwhile to do something like get a panel of people who are retired for, I don't know, a webinar or a conference session or something. Here's what it's like being retired, and here's how I have navigated through, planning how I spend my time and how I decide what to do during the course of a day.
Yeah, lessons learned. Lessons learned.
I like that.
Yeah, even if it's people who say, don't do this because this is what I did for the first year and it didn't go well. That would be valuable.
Yeah, that would be great. I would love to hear that.
I mean, going home right now, watching television for a couple of hours a night sounds heavenly. That would drive me bonkers in retirement. It's Des Robinson said this at night time. If I retired, I'd be dead in 6 months. That's what I worry about.
Who said that?
Des Robinson.
Oh, I don't know him or her. Yeah. Like I struggle when I have an extended break, like now, for example, to get a structure in there. That's why I forgot this meeting.
Yeah, exactly.
I looked at my calendar a couple of days ago and I was like, okay, there it is. It's on your calendar. Remember. And then luckily Drew texted me because here I was. It wasn't that I wasn't doing things, but there was clearly no, tracking with what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah, we're not within the flow of this is a week during a semester where we have a set schedule and other things kind of fit in around that.
Yeah. And I feel like I can't have the rest of my life be like that.
No.
I need something. I need a structure that I don't have right now because work is the structure.
Exactly. Well put.
Yeah.
So much of our lives revolves around our jobs. As you said, Suzie, you spend more time interacting with colleagues and family members sometimes. Mm-hmm. What happens then? Because I guess a lot of jobs aren't like that. I don't know.
Well, I feel, I have friends and family who have other kinds of jobs. And many of them are like, oh, I can't wait until I'm retired. Like they can tell you the day that they're going to retire, and what they're going to do because they're not, I guess, so invested in their job. Not that they're not doing their job, but that's not all they think about all the time.
Right.
And I think in academia, because of its engaging nature and the fact that it's fascinating and it's all ever changing and it's always challenging, that's who we are.
Yeah.
Or who I am anyway. Probably not everyone, but
we could probably look at other professional organizations too, outside of academia. I would imagine, doctors and nurses and other healthcare professionals are in that same boat. It's fascinating work. It's obviously very important work. Do they have these sort of same issues? Do they have organizations that have grappled with these issues? We could borrow from them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a great point. Yeah. Well, this has been, I think, a great discussion. I hope some people listen to it and agree with that, but it's definitely been helpful for me. I hope it's helpful for others.
I enjoyed it.
Good. And Drew, I hope you feel like you did make the right decision in doing this as opposed to going to that general ed meeting.
Well, I can go back for a little while. Then I've got another meeting on Zoom 1. So I can go back for about an hour and refill my coffee and come back here. And then I have that meeting at 1, another one at 2:45. So I think once I leave around 12:45, that'll be the end of me for today. Then I can go back tomorrow and spend a bunch of time there.
Nice.
No,
nice.
Well, anyway.
Well, thank you. Thank you both for the discussion. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you about these issues.
You too, Dave. You too, Suzie.
Thanks, y'all. It was great fun. I enjoyed it.